Welcome, Karolien, and thank you for making some time to talk with Lockdown Generation. So maybe I'll start with giving a quick introduction of you, and then you can complete that. So you are, as I've seen, a research manager and one of the authors of a report called, and I'm reading it from my screen now. So employment and working conditions of selected types of platform work, which was commissioned by Eurofund, sorry, and that is the European Foundation for the Improvement of Living and Working Conditions. So a mouthful. So that's the thing, platform work, that we would like to discuss today and have a closer look at what is it exactly. Yeah, so maybe you can complete that by just quickly introducing yourself and telling us a bit more about who you are.
Okay, perfect. So hello, my name is Karolien. I indeed work as a research manager at KU Leuven, so the University of Leuven in Belgium. And I've actually been doing research on the platform economy or platform work since 2015, since Uber first came to Belgium. So immediately it piqued my interest, and I wanted to understand what is happening. What impact does platform work have on other competitors in the sector? And then, of course, it was the taxi sector who came into focus. And that really started a whole stream of research. One of the recent reports that I wrote, indeed, is the study that you are referring to, which we did for Eurofound. And afterwards, in the last 2 years or so, I've also done work for the European Commission, the European Parliament. We are now doing a study for the European agency that is focusing on health and safety at work. So really looking into what are the implications when it comes to health and well-being of platform workers. So I have quite a broad scope on the topic, and I'm very excited to be able to talk with you today to clarify a bit what our research is about, and also how it has an impact, especially on young people in the labor market.
Yeah, okay. But that's really interesting, because to be honest, I have to admit, I didn't know you also wrote or worked for other researchers about this topic. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So you can actually follow the evolution, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and then
Yes.
up until now. I think many things have then also changed the last 2-3 years.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it has changed in several ways. When we started, it was really, wow, Uber is coming to Belgium. What is happening? It was a big shock. But at that time, we saw that in different European countries, platforms started coming into the market. And from then, it developed very quickly, both in terms of how many platforms are operating, the type of work that they are intermediating, the number of people using platforms as clients or as workers has also really gone up quite a lot. We also saw that platform work has become more diverse. So in the beginning, it was Uber and the taxi services. Now it also is babysitting. It also is programming. It takes different forms. And this heterogeneity, it's really accelerating in the sense that we also see, for example, temporary work agencies now launching their own platforms and vice versa. So it really is taking a lot of different shapes. What is also, I think, very interesting when we think about this evolution is, of course, that policymakers started to react to these developments. So in the beginning, and again, I take the example of Uber, it was really very dedicated actions and regulations on maintaining, basically focusing on the taxi sector mostly, so sectoral agreements and really interventions on that level. But now we know that the European Commission is really thinking of introducing a legislative package to really focus on working conditions of platform workers in general. So also there we see a lot of evolution. So I think in the beginning, especially policymakers didn't really know what to do with these new platforms. There was also very little attention working conditions and employment conditions of platform workers. It was much more focused on competition and regulation and innovation. So also from that perspective, it has changed quite a lot. And I think indeed that we were very lucky to catch this phenomenon from the beginning in our research, because that really allows us to build our knowledge. And also because it has been changing so much, some of our older publications are outdated already. Things that we wrote now have changed. So I think that's also important to point out. So the interview is definitely very timely, I would say.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So maybe before we continue, I would just like to clarify something because our audience is also largely based in the UK, and well, unfortunately, I would say, but that's maybe a personal opinion. The UK is not part of the European Union anymore since very shortly. But the things that we are going to discuss today, can we assume that everything that you know, the research that you did, because you're based in Belgium, as you said, you're linked to a Belgian university who's doing this research, but all the findings, I think we can safely say that they are also applied to people in the United Kingdom. Is that true, or should we take maybe some differences into account in some areas?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good question. So our research covered the European Union, and at the time the UK was also included. Um, but of course, every country has its own regulations, its the own measures that were being implemented. And I think especially the UK is a very interesting case because the platform economy is very well developed there, much more so than in Belgium, for example. So there are definitely some parallels that we can see when it comes to things like working conditions and employment conditions. But when it comes to the regulatory side, there are bigger differences. So when I am aware of those, I will point them out when we continue.
Okay. All right, great. So I think you already touched on a few things. So maybe the first thing we can, well, we have already started, but maybe it's important to maybe define a little bit what exactly is platform work. So before the interview, you also briefly just touched on a few points there. So you spoke about Uber already, yeah. So which is of course a taxi service as we can call it. But then there's also kind of other types of platform work like IT services or design or translation. Or could you maybe provide us with a definition of what platform work is, and then maybe explain a bit the different types of platform work that there are that we know?
Sure. So one of the reasons why Eurofound actually commissioned that study that you referred to in the beginning was precisely because they saw these online platforms popping up and intermediating different forms of work, but actually there was no definition and no understanding of what this type of work really entailed. So one of the things that we worked on was trying to formulate a definition. And actually, as you will see in the report and also in our later studies, the definition that we use is quite broad, precisely because platform work is so diverse. So basically, usually the definition that we use states that platform work is any form of work that is intermediated through an online platform or on an online platform or with the support of an online platform. So that is a very vague, broad definition. But that really is because we see that platform. So basically, the key point is that there is at least a triangular relationship between the different parties involved. You always have the platform, which is a website or an app or something like that, that really helps to connect users. And you have within the users, you have the client on the one hand, and you have the worker on the other hand. Okay. So, for example, in the case of Uber, you have Uber as a platform. The client is the person who is looking for a ride, and then you have the Uber driver as a platform worker. That is very typical of platform work. And the platform is using algorithms to really intermediate these relationships, to allocate work to certain people, to connect the client and the worker, to process the payment that is being made, to monitor the tasks when they are implemented, to evaluate the platform worker, and so on. So that is really typical when it comes to platform work. As I mentioned, we see platform work in many different sectors popping up. Initially, it was really concentrated, especially in the transportation sector, in IT, in household services, in professional services, so things like electricity works, babysitting, cleaning, and so on. So concentrated, but now it's also evolving and going beyond those sectors.
And maybe a question. So the platform, when we talk about the definition, the platform is maybe a silly question, but it's always an online platform. So it always, the transactions always occur online, basically.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. In our understanding, indeed.
Okay.
So we are actually talking about digital labor platforms. Yeah. I think it's a very good, a good way to think about it. And what I wanted to add still is that we always think of platform work in 4 types because that's the easiest way to think about them. So one type is the on-location work that is lower skilled. So for example, a platform intermediating taxi services. If you can drive a car, then in principle, you can be an Uber driver. If you have a bike, then you can be a Deliveroo rider, for example. So anyone can do it, basically. Then on the other hand, you also have on-location tasks where you have to be skilled, so higher skilled. For example, electricity works. I would not be able to fix any electricity issue in my house, but I'm sure that some people have the skills to do so. So those are the first 2 types. And then, of course, there are platforms intermediating online work, such as programming. So basically tasks that you can do in your home. As long as you have a computer, you can work anywhere, anytime, and you are able to do these tasks. Some of these tasks, again, are higher skilled, programming, graphic design, things like that, or lower skilled, like click work. For example, I work through Amazon Mechanical Turk, and I get to see a couple of pictures, and I need to indicate which ones have the traffic lights. That can also be a job in the platform economy. So if you think about platform work in comparison to traditional work, so in a traditional job is basically a package of different tasks. So in my job as a research manager, I do research, I have my team that I support, I do some admin tasks, etc. In platform work, these jobs are broken down into smaller tasks, and these tasks are divided among a crowd of people that is willing to take them up. So I think that's a very important point. Another thing that is much discussed is, of course, the role of the platform. So is the platform really the intermediary connecting the client and the worker, or is the platform the employer? And here, of course, it depends a lot on the specificities, the terms and conditions set by the platform, the employment contracts or the contracts in general that are being used, and also the way that the matching is done. So you have platforms where it's really first come, first serve. So a client posts a task, and if I'm the first one to click on it, then I can do it. In other cases, it's the client really selecting a worker. So if I want to have a qualified electrician coming to my house rather than somebody I'm not so sure of. So there is a lot of variation into exactly how these tasks are allocated, how work is monitored. But I think that's a very topical issue, and we can definitely discuss it a bit more.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned is quite interesting. So what is the role of the platform in this whole as you mentioned, a triangle? I think that's a good way to represent it. What is the role of the platform? So I think you mentioned already a few things, like in terms of what's the word I'm looking for? The employment status. So who is the employer, and what are the rights, or how is the worker, let's say, protected, and so on. And I was also wondering, so nowadays, if we look at employment, so there is also a lot being said and written about diversity and inclusion, like discrimination and so on, how people get a job, how they are selected. So I don't know, did you do any research or in this area of platform work?
Yeah. Yes, and actually we are starting a new research project on it this year. So I'm very excited because I think it's a big issue. I will split your question in 2 sub-questions.
Yeah, my mind is sometimes going in different directions.
No, but they are connected, right? So first on the part when it comes to access to work, it is true that platform work actually lowers the barriers to enter the labor market. Yeah. So it creates a lot of opportunities for people who struggle to find their way to a job or to enter the labor market. For example, if you have care tasks and you're stuck in your home, then it's difficult to find a job in the traditional labor market, if you can call it like that. But if you can work online from home when you want, how long you want, then it's fine. You can actually start a job. So in that sense, the platform economy, it definitely creates new opportunities for inclusion and for entering the labor market. The same thing with the food delivery riders. In principle, you don't have to be able to speak the language. You don't need any degree or qualification. As long as you have a smartphone and a bike, you can start. And usually the platforms themselves, they don't have any formal application processes. They don't ask CVs or certification of certain skills. It's very easy to set up a profile or an account, and then you are starting immediately, basically. So in that sense, there are definitely opportunities. Of course, these opportunities may not be as viable or as clear for everybody. If you don't have digital skills, if you don't have the smartphone, if you struggle a bit, then it's not necessarily automatically that you can enter the platform economy. I think still there are some barriers. For example, I'm thinking if you have a disability that makes that you cannot really read websites very well, and the platform doesn't take this into consideration, then of course there is still a barrier for you to enter the labor market. But in general, the research is suggesting that indeed platform economy offers opportunities for people who otherwise would struggle to enter. When it comes to discrimination, here platform economy can work both ways. So on the one hand, you could say anyone can set up an account. In principle, a lot of things are anonymized. So it's Uber who is sending you as a driver to the client. It's Deliveroo who is connecting you as the food delivery rider with the restaurant and the client. So there is no grounds for discrimination. They don't really select on the basis of your gender, your ethnicity, your skills, and so on. It's just a platform and things are happening automatically. On the other hand, there is also research suggesting that actually in some cases these algorithms, they can discriminate, and this can happen by coincidence or by accident, or it can be on purpose. If it's programmed in a certain way, that actually, there can emerge some challenges. I give an example. There was a famous case of an algorithm that would show profiles of potential workers to a client who had a certain task to be done. But the task to be done, it was something that was typically done by a man. So think electrician or plumber or something like this. And in that case, of course, it could be possible that the algorithm is programmed in such a way that actually it thinks, oh, the client is looking for an electrician, it has to be a man, because all the other electricians that I see, they are men. So the female workers simply pushed aside in that sense. So there are some cases like that as well. And it also is the case that on platforms where the client can select the worker. So imagine that I'm looking for an electrician, and I can see the profiles of the different workers. I see the picture, I see the name, I see the age, for example. I see their sex as they listed it on their profile. I, of course, can discriminate, and the platform cannot do really anything about it because it's the client's choice. And also as a platform worker, this can really be an issue. So there, I think it depends a lot how the platform deals with it, but it's not very clear what really has the overhand, whether it works against discrimination or it fosters discrimination. It's not so clear, and it will depend a bit, I think, also on the specific platform, the work that is being done, the way the allocation works, and so on.
Yeah. Well, if I hear what you're saying, I think it's maybe similar to what we are seeing in normal job circumstances, or when people are looking for a job, not related to any platform work. There can also be discrimination, and sometimes it's very visible, sometimes it's not. Of course, when it comes to algorithms, yes, then it can be really determined. But as you mentioned, if an employer sees a list of people that can potentially do the task he wants to be performed, and he doesn't like the profiles, he can also discriminate. So it's not the platform that is responsible, of course. Okay.
No.
Now, so I think also what I would like to discuss with you is the positive sides, the negative sides of platform work, and where the opportunities lie for young people in particular. So we touched already on a few of those. Now I actually have a very specific, let's say, group of people in mind. So if we are talking, because of course, lockdown generation, we are very concerned about the young people nowadays because there's an economic downfall, let's say. Now, if we think about graduates and people that have just finished university, they just got their degree, but they are now struggling to find a job, or maybe they have been working for 2 or 3 years, but they have just recently lost their job this year. Yeah, what according to you and according to your research are the let's say the positive sides about platform work for them, and what are the negative sides or the things they have to be watch out for when they are considering platform work?
Sure. So on the positive side, I think first of all, the easy access to work is definitely a plus. And this can take different forms. So we know, for example, that there are a lot of students or recent graduates who work as food delivery riders. That there is really a big concentration in those group of platform workers of those younger people, precisely because it's easy, it's flexible, you can just start doing it. The issue, of course, with that, especially the lower skilled work, is that does it really allow you to build up skills that you would use in the job that you have in mind? Maybe not. Maybe as a food delivery rider, you can earn some money, but if you are, let's say, a language major and you want to become a teacher or so, then that type of work doesn't really serve as a clear stepping stone into the direction that you want to go. Of course, there are other types of platform work that would allow you to do that. So you can also be a tutor and register on an online platform and then find clients in that way. Or you can, as a graphic designer, you can enter in some contests or do some assignments and build up a portfolio. So just by the assignment that you do through your platform work.
But
So in that,
sorry,
yeah.
please finish your sentence.
No, I
No, I just
wanted to say that it allows you to exercise and to train some of the skills that you may
yeah.
wanting to use in your future employment, of course.
No, exactly. I think you're completely right. So maybe in terms of building a career, in some cases, it's not really, as you say, a stepping stone. But of course, yeah, in times of need, it can help you to
Earn some
generate a
money.
salary for yourself, earn money, earn a salary. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I'm also wondering very practically,
Mhm.
if you, for example, okay, you are a language major, as you're saying, you have platforms as well where you can act as a tutor for private classes, or you can maybe do some translation work via a platform. But very practically, can you, if you, what is your status? Because do you have to own a company? Do you have to be registered as self-employed, for example, or can you just basically register on the platform and start working 5 minutes after?
So to answer your question, in many cases, you can just start working on the platform and start 5 minutes after. But the status, it really depends on the specific case. The reason is that so there is a huge discussion for many years already, both in research and in policy, asking about what is the status of a platform worker. Is he or she self-employed? Is it a freelancer? Is it a student doing student work? Is it an employee? This really is not so clear. And it also depends on the case. So I know in the UK there are a few cases, actually court cases, where a judge made a ruling on, I think it was on Uber and maybe also on Deliveroo, looking at really very specific conditions under which the platform work was done. And then we know also from other countries that in some cases the judge rules it's an employee very clearly, and in some cases, no, it's definitely a self-employed. So I think this is a discussion that we will not be able to settle. It will have to be examined case by case. And we also know that platforms are very much aware of this. Most platforms state explicitly in their terms and conditions that they are not the employer, that they are solely an intermediary, that if you enter the platform, you do so being a self-employed, or they offer some sort of like a peer-to-peer status, for example, in some cases. But of course, this can be contested. So for example, in the past, we know that some food delivery platforms, they were obliging their workers to wear the collared jackets and to use the backpacks and to do the work in a certain type of way. And then if you start looking at the labor law and checking, okay, what does it mean to be an employer? What conditions need to be fulfilled? Then in some cases, it looked a lot like these people were actually just working in an employment type relationship. So in that sense, you don't necessarily have to have your own business or to register as a self-employed, but it depends a lot on the specific platform, the case, the country in which you are.
Because I'm thinking about people, for example, so a translation or a translator is one example, but then there's also many people who like graduated in digital marketing. So I guess there's many platforms as well where you can perform digital marketing activities or sales activities, for example, like business development. So I'm just wondering if people like they are on a certain government benefit, so because they're unemployed, so they're getting a bit of money from the government every month to support them. In the meantime, they're looking for a job. Maybe they're also registered on some kind of platform where they can perform those kind of activities to earn a bit of money. So yeah, I would just like to understand. Okay, I understand that it's not, there's no general rule, of course, but those people, I imagine they have to be a bit careful because, for example,
Yes.
all the earnings that they have from this platform, do they have to declare this? Do they have to be afraid, for example, that maybe the benefit they're getting from the government allowance might be a problem with that? And also the employer, the company who has those assignments that have to be performed, for them it's also a cost, right? So they have to, in terms of accountancy and taxes, they have to also register this as a cost. So maybe, so all those kind of implications. What would you advise people in these situations to do, basically, just to make sure that they are safe and they don't have any problems afterwards when they did this kind of work and then suddenly they get a phone call or from the government saying, hello, what did you do there? There's a problem. They want to avoid this, of course. So could you maybe enlighten a bit what people should be careful for, what they should check or do in this case?
Sure. No, I think you touch upon a very crucial point. We also know from research that a lot of people, they are excited and they start platform work and they don't think about these things, and then it catches up with them. There are a few really interesting cases about this. I can refer you to a Danish case where somebody was unemployed, but was renting out a car through an online platform. So it was not really platform work as we consider it. But the fact that he was renting out the car meant that he was not available to work, basically. And as a result of this, he lost his unemployment benefits. So indeed, it can be very tricky. We also know cases. I spoke to a platform worker in Belgium who did this kind of work as a student. He earned more than a certain threshold. Suddenly, he lost his student grant. His girlfriend, who was living with them, lost a student grant, and they had to pay a huge tax unexpectedly. So this was really a problem for them because they were depending on the income that he was making as a food delivery rider. So in general, I think if you want to do this type of activity, it's really important to check with the platform, but also to check the national legislation or regulations that exist on this type of work in your country. To look at the tax authorities, for example, if you earn income, how should you declare it? Talk to your unemployment insurance or the public employment agencies, for example, because they should know how to deal with this kind of information. We also know that the labor unions, so trade unions, are very much focusing on precisely those issues, trying to inform platform workers of what exactly will happen or can happen if they don't take all of these things into consideration. So I don't know the full details of the UK case, but I can tell you, for example, in Belgium, we have a legislative framework that allows you to do platform work, which is basically without a status. So you're not necessarily an employer or a self-employed or a worker. It's really occasional work, they call it. It's a specific line in the tax code. And as long as you earn less than, let's say, about 6,000 euros a year, then the government really doesn't care. This money, you don't have to pay any taxes, you don't pay social security contributions, you don't have to register as a self-employed, you don't need to pay VAT. It's really fully exempted of all these things. If you earn more than the threshold, then you have to register as a self-employed, you have to have a VAT number, and then the income is treated in a different way for your taxes. So I can imagine that in the UK, there are specific rules like this as well. And I would really recommend anyone interested in this type of work to check first what implications it could have on other forms of income that you may be earning. I think that's
Yeah, so
really
it's so the advice is basically, as you mentioned, so really to check this and maybe also look at the thresholds. I think maybe after this call or after this meeting, I can find some links that we can direct people to, like youth advice centers and so on, that people can check. I think that's very important because we don't want anybody to have problems afterwards, of course. Thanks for the advice.
Indeed,
Okay.
exactly. And the issue especially is that in some cases people think about the short-term consequences, but of course there are also longer-term consequences. If you do this type of work for many years and you don't pay any social security contributions, then you don't contribute to your pension maybe, and then it catches up in a number of years only. Another thing that we see very often is that people are not really aware that they are insured against accidents at work, for example, until the day that they run into an accident. And then they start thinking, oh, am I actually insured? What happens? Who is liable? What should I do? What are the procedures? And then, of course, this can have huge consequences financially. Maybe you won't be able to do the work anymore, depending on the type of injury that you have. So all of these things, you really need to think about it before. But what I also wanted to add still is that it depends a lot, of course, on the type of work that you do. So we know that many people doing the higher skilled tasks like the translation, the programming, and so on, a lot of these people already have the freelance status, or they do actually, they are doing occupations that are in sectors where usually a lot of people are working on a freelance basis anyway. So, for example, lawyers, they tend to be self-employed. So if you also would offer legal advice through a platform, then many of those lawyers, they would just register it under their own account as they would with other types of activities. So again, it really depends on the precise regulations that are applicable, the specific case, the job that you do, the platform, and so on. But we would really recommend anyone to carefully check everything, like what are the implications financially, legally, before you take on this type of work.
So I think if I understand you correctly, there are already a lot of regulations in many countries in place. But if I if my conclusion is correct, I think there are still a lot of gaps when it comes to legal regulation and so on. Yeah, and
Yes.
is like I guess there's more and more pressure on platforms now to comply with certain laws or regulations, or is there more pressure from governments towards platforms to really regulate this better?
Yeah, I would say so. And you see actually different types of behaviors from platforms in response to this. So especially initially when different member states had different regulations, then sometimes platforms would just close down the business in that country and move to another country. We saw this, for example, with Uber in several cases. So Uber has different business models, and depending on the member state and the regulation that was in place, they would roll out one of them or multiple of them, or roll it out and then take it back and move elsewhere. So platforms are really aware also of what is happening. Also, the example I gave earlier with the colored jackets that people had to wear, as soon as there was this court case saying, okay, but you forced as a platform your worker to wear actually a uniform, then suddenly this obligation disappeared completely from the terms and conditions. So platforms are very much aware of what is happening in terms of regulation. And in some cases, they really are modifying their business models or their way of working to prevent it to some extent. On the other hand, we also see, and this is really important, a number of platforms are really taking this to heart, and also a lot of bottom-up activities to help improve the conditions under which their platform workers work. So we do see a number of platforms now offering accident insurance, for example, if you register as a worker through the platform. So we have both the pressure from that is top down and also the pressure from the trade unions, for example. And at the same time, you have the bottom-up initiatives. You also have platform workers themselves really trying to push on platforms. So again, here I can refer to a case from Sweden, if I remember well, where platform workers working as food delivery riders on bicycles, they were really trying to convince the platform how important it is that they have winter tires, because if you have to bike in the snow, it's not nice if your bike is not well equipped for it. And then the platform, they agreed to pay some of the costs related to the winter tires. So I think there indeed is a lot of pressure on platforms, and I think we should keep putting the pressure on them, precisely because there are people involved, there are workers involved. The conditions should at least have some minimum standards. It should not be exploitation. And you cannot assume that, especially since some types of platforms and some platform work, they really tend to attract especially the people with the weaker labor market profile, so the more vulnerable people in the labor market. So we really should avoid that these people are being exploited or that they face severe consequences that they cannot oversee when they take up this type of work. And on the final note, the European Commission is also very much working on this topic. So as I mentioned, before we started the recording, the Commission is now looking into implementing really a legislative policy to try and regulate work conditions. It's not yet clear what this will look like, but they are working on it. And we can think of different formulas like having minimum standards or minimum wages, or clarifying certain things in the terms and conditions, or even going as far as assuming that if you are a platform worker, then you are an employee, and it's up to the platform to prove that you are not, whereas now it's very often the reverse. So it can go in different ways, but there definitely is pressure on the platforms.
Okay. Well, I think it's positive. I mean, if I hear what you're saying, there is, of course, yes, they are businesses. So if they run into some problems, they are maybe not willing to take as much responsibility. So they push that away a bit. But then there's also examples of platforms who are willing to take more responsibility, who are doing more for their workers. So I think it's, that's positive at least. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe one recommendation also to anyone interested in doing this type of work, look into that. So try and understand what platforms are good platforms or really support the workers and offer good conditions, and which platforms are more problematic. So we saw, for example, in Belgium a few years ago, Deliveroo suddenly changed their business model, and then a lot of Deliveroo riders left and they just joined a different food delivery platform which offered better conditions and which actually is working with employment contracts. So be aware of this, that there is this diversity in the platforms, so you can really pick and choose the one that works best for you.
Okay, that's good advice. All right, that's good advice. Okay, so I think we touched a lot of topics today. It was very interesting, very insightful. So I think as a general conclusion, I believe that we can say that, of course, there are pitfalls when it comes to regulation, so you should be very careful not to get yourself into trouble. But on the other hand, I think what we can conclude is that there is also a lot of opportunities, especially when it comes to an easier access to the labor market or to getting a job, especially for young people in these times. Maybe not as a career stepping stone at first, for in all examples, but at least to secure an income for yourself when it's needed. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Maybe a final question. I don't know if that is something that if it's a good question or not, but how do you see the well, yes, perhaps, yeah. How do you see the future for platform work? How do you think it will evaluate? For example, when I'm asking this question, I'm thinking about how many positions are open when it comes to platform work as a whole? Or can this be, for example, a solution also to battle the unemployment problem that we could face? Is there anything in this direction? Do you have an opinion or a vision on this?
Yeah, sure. So I personally think that platform work, it's clear that it's here to stay. And if you look at how much it has grown in the past 5 years, then we can expect that it will become even bigger and even more grounded also in the labor market. So as I said, 5 years ago, if we wanted to interview an Uber driver, it was really difficult to find anyone. And now a lot more people are interacting with this type of work or taking it up, really as a daily activity. So I think it will only become bigger, and it will become more normal, so normalized. And this also, of course, if we really start getting the regulations, then it will be here to stay. I'm convinced of this. I also think that we now really see efforts to improve the working and the employment conditions, which I think are welcomed by all the stakeholders. So in that sense, there is a real possibility that platform work becomes an even better, a more viable form of work in the future. I think if we also think about this pandemic, of course, now online work has really grown a lot. Yeah, I think everybody is working from their homes. So we see this huge spur in telework, for example. And I think this also taught people that actually you can do a lot by not being in this traditional setting, by not going to the office, by not working between 9 to 5. So this flexibility, I think people will really want to have it also in the future. And we do see that technologies are also taking over more traditional forms of work, traditional companies, and so on. So I can tell you that also in my job, we are now thinking again, oh, since everybody can work from home for a year, do all of us need offices, or should we invest rather in digital technologies so that people can work in a more flexible way? So in that sense, I think what platform work is also doing, it's really changing what jobs look like and how we do work. And this, of course, is now accelerated with the new technologies that are being introduced. It's accelerated because of the pandemic. So in that sense, I think platform work can have a very bright future if we now really spend the effort and the time to make sure that this is done under good conditions, that it's not a form of exploitation. And then I think, I think we will see many more people becoming platform workers in the future.
Okay, yeah, that's very clear, and I think, yeah, that's also the feeling I have. So it's definitely, as you mentioned, it's here to stay, and yeah, it will only become bigger. So that's okay, great. All right, 40 minutes. I only promised 30 to take 30 minutes of your time, but yeah, I can see you're very passionate about your work and about yeah, the research you're doing. So that's yeah, I would like to thank you for your time and for giving us these valuable insights and advice and tips. So that's really great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was, yeah, as you mentioned, I really enjoyed talking about this subject. I think since we have been doing this work for 5 years, it's really nice to see everything that has been changing. And I'm so excited to see what will happen with this new initiative that the Commission, for example, is pushing to really improve working and employment conditions. We are also now doing work again on health and safety at work and psychological well-being. So I think, yeah, we can really make some progress in this area. And if anyone has any questions, they can always contact me, of course. I'd be happy to offer support. So thank you again for the invitation. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Okay, great. Oh, so maybe if you want, we can. It's up to you. We can add your email address to the interview if people want to contact you. Okay, great.
Sure. Yeah,
that's a good idea. And maybe we can talk again in like a year or 2 years to discuss the evolution.
Yeah.
So that would be very very interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm very
Thank you.
curious what we will say then. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting to find out, to see what the evolution is. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Karolien.
Thank you.